Paidler brandished his sword instead of replying. Along with the sword, a blue thunder surged from behind him like a storm. It was as if a sea of lightning spread from Paidler out of nowhere. Ko quickly shot a series of arrows to counter the rushing blue thunder. The space, tinged with chaos, was illuminated by the intermingled blue energies. Looking at you again, it seems you're not a descendant but his ghost. Were you called Paidler Runcandle? I no longer used that name. The Godslayer's arrow pierced through a blue thunder and aimed at the charging Paidler. Ko calmly distanced himself, while Jean plunged into the fray to intercept Paidler in his pursuit. The sword standing in Silas's way was Sigmund, not Bradamante. After switching swords, Jin's entire body filled with lightning energy. Aura-based lightning energy, mana-based blue thunder. Though the lightning emitted by the three individuals was entirely different, they appeared exactly the same. I don't know why you became a ghost, but your murderous intent runs deep. Although my memories of Timar aren't complete, he seemed to hold you in high regard. I've also forgotten many things. However, I didn't hear members of the Tribe of Legends talk much. Why do you need a long chat? You just have to face my weapon. Quick and precise. If you could summarize Paidler's sword in 2 words, those would be it. The only downside to his swordsmanship reaching the realm of transcendence was its destructive power. But even that was surpassed with the addition of the blue thunder. Ko fought at mid-range while Jean fought up close. Therefore, both Jean and Paidler fought with Ko in mind. Paidler was convinced he had to defeat Ko to aim at Jean, while Jean believed Ko had to remain unharmed for what would come next. And the battle with Paidler wasn't the last. I have to finish it before Ko tires. I have to quickly kill that legend called Ko so I can face Jean. They didn't need to check each other's strength. All three were exerting all their might from the beginning. The ground and sky screamed each time swords, arrows, and lightning clashed, as if they were turned upside down. As if the sun rose over the rotten sea, the rays of the three tore through the chaos in the Garden of Swords. If this sight wasn't a battle between the ancestor from 1,000 years ago and the current descendant, but resembled a bright light that purified the family, couldn't have been better. The inevitable reality scratched at Jin's insides. That fact made Jean suffer even more than the blue thunder stabbing through his entire body. As Paidler was a person from 1,000 years ago, Jean had never felt a true connection with him. He had only glimpsed some of his records as an observer. Still, it felt as if he was cutting down an intimate friend with whom he had been very close until yesterday, with whom he had a deep connection. Arg. Paidler didn't feel such pain. It was true he had no personal feelings toward Jean before they crossed swords. However, he didn't see Jean as a distant descendant in the first place but as a manifestation of Timar, the Runcandle of those days. You also lose everything. Paidler's dark eyes said it all. Brother Jean. Blood spurted from Jin's neck. The rune of Mtulta is now completely broken and has no function. Even if it were fine, it would have no meaning against one of the ancient 10 great knights. The wound wasn't deep, but if it had been a little deeper, it would have led straight to death. It was only at that moment, as he watched the drops of blood scatter through the air, that Jean realized the unnecessary emotions dwelling within him during the fight. Sympathy, pity, guilt, or complex emotions hard to articulate. Paidler wasn't an opponent one could face with such feelings. It's not just about doing your best, but having the tenacity to finish him off. Jean knew it better than anyone. Jin's body transcended the human limit, but not his mind. Whether Paidler's words were true or not, there's no doubt he gave his all for the ancient Runcandle. But, as Paidler said, the camaraderie they once shared couldn't replace their total loss. He can't defend him, whose heart that once protected the family has turned into a ghost. Jean can understand this situation as much as he wants under normal circumstances. But now, Jean faced Paidler as the next patriarch of Runcandle. Regardless of the reasons, harboring somber feelings toward someone intent on destroying the clan was unacceptable. There's one last thing I want to ask, Paidlernim. Do you have any intention of stopping now? None at all. Then I will eliminate you not as a descendant of Timar, but as a member of the current Runcandle. Jean closed his eyes for a moment. In that fleeting instant his eyelids shut. The feeling directed toward Paidler shut as well. Before he opened his eyes again, Paidler was unleashing the magical sword he had created. Ultimate Shadow Sword Technique. Secret Sword Technique of Runcandle, Thunder of Retribution Paidler Runcandle. A magical sword secret technique paired with the hellfire of Empress Lamasera Runcandle. At a glance, Jean and Ko could think of the sword that was the basis of this technique. The hellfire and thunder of retribution were finally completed after Timar taught the 10 great knights how to use the Sword of Legends. Ko's eyes hardened. So you too have spent your life chasing the shadow of the Absolute. Ko had also dedicated his life to reaching that sword. To resemble the sword of the god of battle. But that's a realm that can never be reached unless it's the original. Against the thunder of retribution, Ko unleashed the 10th mystic technique of the Battle King, Tsunami. The lightning that started with Paidler and Ko took such an identical form that it could be called the same technique. The process of those who want to rise to the top will eventually give birth to similar results. Do you mean you're the original member of the Tribe of Legends? No. I simply wish to pay my respects. To acknowledge that someone who was never a member of the Legends is fighting in the same way as I am. If there was a difference between Ko and Paidler, it was the body. The lightning energy symbolizing the Tribe of Legends needed a body that could handle it. Just as a blessed body is needed to use Runcandle's final movements. But can you withstand it? With that defenseless human body of yours. That's why Paidler's old comrades called him a weakling. His sword was covering up his inherent flaws with his life as collateral. I've already died once anyway, you keep saying useless things. Ko smiled. Unlike Jean, he harbored no special feelings towards Paidler. He simply took satisfaction in having a strong opponent in front of him, fighting for his brother. The tsunami and thunder of retribution overlapped. Jean kept preventing Paidler from closing the distance with Ko. It was about increasing strength while enduring until Paidler's energy was fully consumed. From then on, Paidler began pressing Jean instead of Ko, and Ko seemed to be covering Jean with all his might. As a result, wounds were forming on Ko's body. If they had maintained the same combined formation as before, Paidler would have been the one to start suffering significant injuries. It's not efficient. At first glance, that seemed it. Paidler couldn't help but speculate. There must be a reason for this inefficient offensive attack. It probably has to do with the energy currently shining in Jin's illuminated heart. Of course, even that was overwhelmingly vast power. But for now it was just that. As Ko hinted, Paidler never thought that this power could be sublimated to the original. Because Jin wasn't a Genesis Knight. It was unlikely that Jin could display the pinnacle realm that not even he had ever stepped into, the realm that only Timar had reached 1,000 years ago. However, by the time the tsunami and thunder of retribution reached their climax, Ko said confidently, "Brother Jin, show your ghostly ancestor now, the original peak sword." Ko continued with his words, and the energy from Jin's illuminated heart began to explode in all directions. Sword of the God of Battle, 10th movement. Sword of the Reign of the King of Legends unleashed. In an instant, the tsunami and thunder of retribution stopped moving. It was as if the fighting beasts faltered at the sight of a greater beast. Jin didn't stop there. He opened the next form, Sword of the God of Battle, 10th movement, 2nd form, Sword of the Reign of the King of Legends War. Sigmund had a strong will to annihilate those who opposed the Plutonian tribe. Ko breathed proudly, and Paidler briefly looked at Jin with a stiff body. Now he saw Jin's own Timar, and soon realized it was just an illusion. The man in front of him wasn't Timar or a member of the ancient Runcandle. It was Jin Runcandle. Not someone from 1,000 years ago like him, but a shining Runcandle living right now. But nothing changes. Paidler didn't feel moved or frightened by the vision. Nothing changes. The determination to eliminate him and witness Runcandle's downfall didn't waver in the slightest. The clouds that had gathered according to Jin's will covered Ram. which oppressed the sky. Rosa, the Prophet, and the main factions attacking Hephaestus were able to witness that spectacle. Even if my body and soul cannot remain in the abyss of heaven and hell, even if my name and all that I have lost are erased from this world once more, the light from the thunder of retribution, which began to fluctuate again, spread even brighter. The renewed thunder of retribution transcended all the swords Paidler had used during his lifetime. "I won't let you save Runcandle." Suddenly, a faint memory surfaced in Paidler's mind. It seemed like a long time ago he had spoken similar words to what he had just said. "Even if my body and mind, and those I love, ultimately vanish completely from this world, even if all that remains in the end is despair and nightmares, I will protect Runcandle with you." For some reason, what Paidler said at that time spread like a distant echo inside Jean. However, Jean didn't stop the sword. Tears welled up in Jin's eyes, soaked with lightning energy, and Paidler's eyes filled with infinite emptiness. "Ah!" The lightning struck where Sigmund and Silas' swords clashed. They showed no signs of backing down, even as they were struck by the lightning from the sword of the reign of the King of Legends spewed by the clouds and the blue thunder poured by the thunder of retribution. On the contrary, they advanced towards each other with more ferocity and speed. The aftermath of their battle now ravaged the entire Garden of Swords. The storm of their sword energies had spread beyond the graves where the swords of the ancestral guardians were embedded, reaching the outer walls and the main house. Ko, who began attacking again, was not affected by the sword of the reign of the King of Legends. Instead, he seemed to empower the killer god with Jin's lightning energy, resonating with the energy of the battle god. Still, all of Kalen was eroded by chaos, but the chaos energy could no longer be found in the Garden of Swords. It was because Jin's, Ko's, and Paidler's lightning had erased the chaos from the Garden of Swords. But to Jean, seeing the now bright blue Garden of Swords seemed more distressing than when it was filled with chaos. "Oh!" Paidler roared. His body was being torn apart. He had a hole in his left cheek, while his waist twisted and split, emitting gruesome sounds of bones breaking and readjusting. Just then, a giant arrow from the Godslayer pierced through the center of his chest. Through the hole in his chest, the lightning behind him could be seen. Still, Paidler did not fall and swung his sword again. His body, which should have died and stopped more than 10 times over, only emitted more formidable power with each strike. "Where do I have to cut to finish him?" It seemed like he wouldn't stop even if his neck fell off. It seemed like he would only stop if everything that composed Paidler's body was destroyed. His blood, his flesh, and even the last bit of bone. "Stubborn ghost," Ko said as he drew the string of his bow. The word stubborn did not refer to the chaos energy that composed Paidler. It referred to a special condition Paidler was going through. Transcendence. The transcendence of a warrior surpassing limits while facing a formidable enemy, allowing Paidler to keep wielding his sword despite being torn apart. Just like Ron Hyran had transcended the fate of death in the War of the Sword Emperor Castle, Paidler was also pushing past the limit as he clashed swords with Jean. "Timar, I can see it now too. The next level." With each passing second, Paidler felt his body growing lighter. It seemed like the destructive power of the original sword of the reign of the King of Legends, which dominated the thunder of retribution initially, no longer seemed like a threat. There wasn't much excitement as he pushed Sigmund away, and even when the lightning pierced through his body, he felt no pain. But even if it goes beyond that level, what meaning does it have? The Godslayer's arrow pierced Paidler once again. Nothing but futile hatred, unable to overcome even chaos. "You could never defeat Brother Jean, even if he didn't call me. Just by transcending like Ron, it doesn't mean everyone can achieve results like Ron. The values of protecting people despite being consumed by chaos and the desire to kill could not be the same." As if to refute it, Paidler stabbed and left a long gash in Jin's chest. Jean pushed Paidler aside without flinching, and a snap was heard as Paidler fell to the ground. Then he rose again and aimed at Silas. As he looked more miserable, the energy of the thunder of retribution amplified. It grew incessantly, In terms of power alone, the thunder of retribution reached a level comparable to that of the sword of the reign of the King of Legends. It seemed to be out of control. The blue thunder went beyond the cloud formed by the sword of the reign of the King of Legends and caused damage to Ram, the Chaos Dragon, and the black battleships. In the end, you've lost your reason and started striking even your allies. From Brother Jin's perspective, this isn't bad at all. He's not losing his reason, Brother Ko. Jin rather thought the opposite. What? Since it's going to be the end anyway, it seems like he's trying to destroy as much as possible in Runcandle. Wow! A huge crack appeared under the bottom of Ram. The Chaos Dragons and black ships flying beneath them instantly turned to ashes. The major factions waiting outside could see Ram becoming unstable for the first time. Space began to tear open in the sky. As the leader said, "The 12th flagbearer is damaging Ram's power," said Barakt. He was mesmerized by the immense lightning illuminating the Garden of Swords, following the blue flame from before. They felt both fear and excitement at the sight of such immense power, something they would never have seen unless it was the Patriarch, Siren Runcandle, or the late Ron Hyran. It's not the power of the 12th flagbearer, but the power of Runcandle's great knight, the Blue Thunder King. Rosa Runcandle and the Prophet have been too ambitious. Are you saying there's another knight like the 12th flagbearer in the Garden of Swords? Yes, but it's a dying ember. All fleet, ready for intensive bombardment. We can't miss this opportunity. Unlike Zippel, the Kinslow fleet has not suffered significant damage yet. As the battleships, led by Granil, gathered at the vanguard, the fleet of up to 500 battleships charged all their main cannons. Like a meteor shower, the bombardment rained down on Ram and the Garden of Swords. More than 80% of the fleet's attack was directed towards the garden, because it seemed like their attack wouldn't be enough to hit Ram. But Zephyrn's breath hit the side of Ram. Seeing Kinslow's bombardment from the opposite side, Zippel also gathered his fleet. All of his main cannons were aimed at Ram. "We must attack before Runcandle's battleship recovers." A mountain of fire formed behind Cadden. He managed to release all of his stored power while enduring Ram's main cannon and smashing the Chaos Dragon and black ships. Damn it! The soul of the 10 great knights. I didn't expect this to happen. The Prophet bit her lip, looking at Rosa. It was Rosa who ordered Paidler to be summoned. So even if Paidler failed against Jean, Rosa wouldn't blame her. However, regardless of whether the mission to kill Jean succeeded or not, the Prophet's inability to control Paidler stemmed from her own lack of skill. If Rosa questioned her about it later, the Prophet would find herself vulnerable to scrutiny again. Nothing ever goes as planned. Judging by the situation, it seems that not even Paidler will be able to defeat Jean. I should have warned him about the dangers of using the soul of the Great Knight. Even the Prophet had predicted that Stam and Lionel wouldn't be enough. But Paidler's case was truly unexpected. She knew that even with variables like the invocation of members of the Tribe of Legends and the sword of the reign of the King of Legends, if it was Paidler, he would be able to finish Jean off. Maybe it might actually be for the best. If even Paidler is defeated, then Rosa Runcandle will have to take matters into her own hands. If that were to happen, it's highly likely that the speed at which Rosa's mind collapses will accelerate. However, the Prophet had no justification to speak before Rosa. So while she thought about it, Rosa spoke up first. Understood why Joshua in the past was defeated like that. Retrieve Paidler's soul. Are you saying you'll intervene personally? Rosa didn't respond. Instead, she diverted Cadden's incoming flames. Fragments of Ram, Chaos Dragons, and black ships floated in the chaotic black sky. Meanwhile, Kinslow's bombardment hit the Garden of Swords. Do these humans dare to challenge the gods like us? We only heard from you that outside was dizzy, but I didn't expect it to be like this. Ko fired the Godslayer and intercepted the cannonballs falling towards Jean. Most were countered by the sword of the reign of the King of Legends and the Blue Thunder, but occasionally, some projectiles managed to penetrate. And it's because Jean was organizing the power. It was natural because he was facing strong men like Stam, Lionel, and Paidler one after another. They would have been absolute beings in any era without Siren. However, unlike Jean, Paidler didn't have anyone to block the bombardment, nor the will to defend against them by himself. He didn't even dodge the cannonballs, and continued to radiate blue thunder throughout the Garden of Swords and Jean. An evil ghost transcending through hatred. The final destination Paidler reached resembled a monster like Smarian. His appearance was no longer that of a human. Over 70% of his body, which had been emitting a faint bluish light, had disappeared. His body, floating without legs, was riddled with holes. He held the sword with the 3 fingers he had left, had lost half his head, and his single eye was still full of hatred. Can this really be called the result of transcendence? Actually, the result was decided from the moment the sword of the reign of the King of Legends was executed. The reason Jean couldn't deal with him was simply a matter of efficiency. If Jean waited a bit, the thunder of retribution would dissipate and Paidler would self-destruct. After that, even if one of his fingers remained, it was clear that Paidler wouldn't be a threat even if he crawled on the ground towards him. The thunder of retribution began to abate. But the next moment, just like what happened to Lionel, Jean could see how the soul drained from Paidler's remaining body. Unlike Lionel, the soul refused to leave the body. He clearly resisted the prophet's control. I've never seen so much resentment in my life, Brother Jean. Brother, why are you approaching him? Isn't your shadow sword still unable to cut the soul? It's not even worthy of cutting. It's already a ruin. Jean had a completely different thought when he tried to cut Lionel's soul. Jean approached Paidler because he wanted to tell him something. Paidler Nim. Paidler swung his sword against the approaching Jean. The sword was as powerful as if a child wielded it. Not a scratch was left on Jin's body. As great as the resentment was, Paidler's energy had truly depleted. Sir, you will be summoned again. That's the only reason the person who summoned you is trying to retrieve the soul now. Still, Paidler continued to swing his sword, resisting the prophet's soul retrieval. So at that time, take revenge on me instead of Runcandle and Timar from 1,000 years ago. Please harbor hatred towards me, not towards the distant past about which even your memories aren't clear. That would undoubtedly be better for you. With those words, Jean watched Paidler's soul escape. The lightnings of the sword of the reign of the King of Legends slowly dissipated. Jean was breathing heavily. The fatigue from consecutive battles and mental shock made him feel nauseous. Brother, are you okay? I'm fine for now. He could still keep fighting. Although his condition wasn't the best, they believed he could unleash his prowess at least once more. Jean and Ko lifted their heads at the same time and looked up at the sky. When the cloud formed by lightning disappeared, the bottom of Ram became visible again. The sight of chaos dragons and black ships descending like a swarm of bees fleeing the nest, and the scene where they were destroyed by cannon fire, also shook their eyes dizzyingly. At first glance, it seemed that Runcandle was finally on the defensive, but it was far from over. As if to ridicule the external assessment that Runcandle was falling behind in technological development, Ram continuously spewed out chaos dragons and black ships. Furthermore, Ram was reloading its main cannon. The black cannon that had led Zippel's second fleet to annihilation with a single blow was now aiming at Kinselo. However, we must prepare to escape, inflict maximum damage, and rescue the knights when the clan does not accurately know its strength. That was why Jean visited the Garden of Swords alone today, and hoped to have achieved the former to some extent. The knights killed today will eventually be resurrected, and summoned knights like Lionel or Paidler Nim will appear again. But there must be limitations. There will definitely be a significant cost. Rick Alton. The land expected to be the area where humans are supplied to make clones of Joshua's body. Just cloning him required at least hundreds or thousands of humans. It is incalculable how many human lives would be needed to revive people like Paidler and Lionel. The escape of the rebels depends on the skills and luck of the elder chief. Jean wanted to pursue and protect them even now, but that would rather put them in danger. No new energy emerged from the mausoleum. Intuitively, Jean sensed that Rosa would come to look for him. The chaos enveloping the Garden of Swords was converging again towards the same place. The center of the black ships, probably where Rosa would be. From now on, there was no chance of winning against her. As expected, all the maximum power of Kinselo and Zippel has arrived. But even after dealing with the captain of the Black Knights, the summoned former patriarch, and the great knight, Runcandle was still resisting. Good idea. Even in my opinion, it would be better to plan for the future. We will need the help of our brothers if we are to defeat the master of this land. The same goes for escaping now. Please take cover, Brother Kao. Kao snorted at Jin's solemn voice. Ha, it seems you feel sorry for having used me as a meat shield. Don't feel it, brother. The death of a summoned being is not real anyway. Kao was already convinced. He knew that for Jin to leave this place, his sacrifice would be necessary. Jin's gaze turned to the mausoleum. Before embarking on the escape, he wanted to strike the mausoleum one last time. But part of the chaos gathering in the center of Ram was forming a barrier near the mausoleum. They are openly cautious of any trouble with the mausoleum. I was going to suggest hitting that place before leaving, but I guess it's better to go. Brother. Needless to say, it seemed that the chaos barrier could only be destroyed with a sword that was at least of the level of Hellfire or the sword of the reign of the King of Legends. Or the ultimate shadow sword technique. But after that, escaping from here would be impossible. I am convinced that the mausoleum is a very important and weak place, so it's not bad. Jean turned around. Talaris was in a forest about 150 kilometers from the Garden of Swords. After making his way there, Jean had to ride Mort and head to the area where the Red Owl was hiding. Shuri. Nye. The two of them rode on Shuri, who had just been summoned from the Ruby. In the distance, Jean saw the Chaos Knights starting to gather again like cockroaches. However, no matter how many there were, they posed no great threat. They would only expend a bit of stamina. Let's go to Talarisnim. Following Shuri's trajectory as she ran at full speed, the Chaos Knights began to explode in heaps. And not long after they began to flee, Jean and Kao realized one thing. I've been curious since earlier. Aren't those also your enemies? Kao pointed to the rear with his chin. Kinselo's fleet had been providing ground support fire since they both fought against Paidler. Even now, their support continued to the point where Kao didn't even need to cover Jean. The Chaos Dragons descending to catch Jean didn't even reach Shuri and rusted in the air, and all the cannon shots from the black ships were being intercepted. They are enemies. They only recognize that they will need me later. They must have judged that neither Zippel nor Kinselo could defeat the Garden of Swords alone. The same would happen to Jean if he couldn't call back his legend brothers to the human world. No, he thought that even if he called back his brothers, he might need a temporary alliance with his enemies. Current Runcandle is not just a huge force. Like Gleek, Runcandle had become a huge disaster that struck the entire world. Well, they're not completely stupid. They killed the Chaos Knights standing in the way and passed through the main gate. Ahead, the endless black landscape of chaos continued. Finally, even when they got close to the center of Kalen, the landscape did not change. Only then did Jean know that not only the Garden of Swords, but all of Kalen was invaded by chaos. It wasn't entirely unexpected. Undoubtedly, materials were needed to master such chaos. However, he couldn't help but blank out seeing it with his own eyes. For me, the survival and prosperity of Runcandle have more value than anything else. Nothing can surpass that value. Even if billions of humans die in the process of achieving it, in the end, even if the world perishes in that devastating fight and struggle, and only a few members of Runcandle remain in it, I don't mind. Jean suddenly remembered what Rosa had said in the past. Are you really going to destroy the entire world, leaving only Runcandle behind? Like a beast bearing its fangs, the center of Ram split in half. The main cannon fired straight ahead and reached Kinselo's fleet. The enormous body of Zephyrin was pierced in half, and the overlapping protective shields behind her burst. It was the first time Jean felt relieved to see that the enemy hadn't died. Although Zephyrn's torso was pierced, She breathed out her breath as if she hadn't been hit, and her power didn't diminish at all. For the first time in Kinzelo's counterattack, including Zephyrin, the damage also extended to Ram's hull. The left side of the hull was collapsing. Clearly, Ram seemed weaker than before. That fact only meant one thing. The power of Rosa, which was being used by Ram, was being withdrawn. The total amount of chaos hadn't decreased at all. Amidst the intense war that continued regardless of the passage of time. Before Jean realized it, Shuri had traveled 50 kilometers outside of the Garden of Swords, and Jean faintly felt the cold air piercing through. Talaris was also approaching Jean. Before, whenever Talaris came to rescue him, Jean felt an indescribable relief. But now it was quite the opposite. No! The fact that the coldness transmitted so far meant that Talaris had already entered combat, and at that moment, she wasn't in a state where she could unleash all her power. And the chaos-tainted land was Rosa's domain. An ominous intuition assaulted Jin's head. Rosa couldn't ignore Talaris's movements. Surely, Rosa Runcandle will try to deal with Talaris, Nim before me. It wasn't certain how strong Rosa had become after accepting chaos. However, even before the Garden of Swords became like this, Rosa was one of the strongest in the world. The current Talaris couldn't match her. Meow! After sensing Jin's anxiety, Shuri tried to speed up, but she was already at her limit. Darn it, Talaris Nim. If something went wrong, Jin wouldn't be able to face Cirrus or his other companions. He would have no way to repay the favors he had received from the Hidden Palace. This thought was driving him crazy. Calm down, brother Jin. Kao looked up at the sky and said. He had been observing the fleet of each faction that had been supporting only Jin and himself, confirming that they were now aiming at a distant point. Kinzelo and Zippel also found Talaris and began providing support fire. The owner of the cold energy must be a very valuable person to you, brother. Should I provide cover for her? Is that possible, from this distance? Kao raised his long bow. It seems you've forgotten my specialty. I'm the only battle king who can fight while supporting his brothers. When it comes to long-range support, maybe I'm better than Sister Goddess of Battle. I need to focus, so clear away the distractions. I got it. The arrows of the Godslayer bow rose into the sky. The bright energy of lightning flew a distance of 25 kilometers and created huge pillars of light. With each shot, cold sweat ran down Kao's body like rain. Blood flowed from between his clenched lips, and his heart beat as if it would burst at any moment. Jean didn't ask Kao how the situation was developing. It was clear that the cold energy hadn't been extinguished. It was only precarious. It seemed faint enough to flicker out at any moment. Finally, when they reached the pillars of light formed by arrows, Jean could see Talaris panting and covered in blood. As soon as he saw her, his heart skipped a beat. The blood didn't belong to Talaris. It was Mort Snowtoad's blood. Mort had been teleporting continuously within Rosa's chaos energy while protecting Talaris. Even that would have been impossible without Kao's support fire and the fleet. Mort's pure white body was soaked in blood. Jean! Talaris Nim! Jean wanted to rush over immediately, but he saw a single black blade tearing through the pillars of light from the Godslayer bow in front of Talaris. It was Rosa Runcandle's sword, soaked in frenzy and chaos. Have you come? Rosa greeted Jean with a mocking smile, and Jean drew Bradamanti. Somehow, Talaris avoided fatal wounds, but his condition wasn't great. He had internal injuries, and the breath he exhaled was coated in blood. The warrior who challenged Siren the most, if not for that, Talaris would have been torn apart by the frenzy by now. Runcandle's enemies are attacking the Garden of Swords, and yet you've come here with Talaris Nim. I didn't know you held such deep grudges against him. The chaos energy protecting the Garden of Swords, Kalen and Ram, has weakened. All that chaos was converging on Rosa. In other words, it now solely depended on Rosa's personal strength. Jean was recalling the nightmare of the War of the Sword Emperor Castle because of the massive chaos Rosa unleashed. Rosa narrowed her eyes as if Jin's words were amusing. Wouldn't you have done the same if you were in my place? Undoubtedly, Rosa Runcandle would prioritize dealing with Talaris Nim over me. Jean immediately thought of that as soon as he faintly felt Talaris's cold energy. Looking back, there was no reason to be so sure. It was much more efficient for Rosa to continuously overwhelm the formidable forces of Zippel and Kinselo than to deal with Talaris without hesitation. After the chaos energy between Ram and the city faded, the cannon shots from each force pierced the sky over the Garden of Swords more easily than before. When Jean didn't respond, Rosa smiled. You may not want to admit it, but you resemble me a lot. Tang. A thunderous sound rang out from the Godslayer. Rosa lightly knocked down KO's arrow. Although KO lost his energy due to the ultra-long distance support, not even Jean, before getting tired, could have easily withstood such power. What do you mean he resembles you? Don't compare the 13th Battle King of the great Tribe of Legends to a monster like you. Tribe of Legends, this is the first time I've seen you in person. But the first impression is quite disappointing. You're provoking me to save that boy. The Sword of Legends ability the younger one often displayed didn't emit such a pathetic feeling. The power gained through immorality. Are you so arrogant as to believe in that? Immorality. I've never distrusted such ambiguous human standards. Even before this body became chaos. Squeak dash. Suddenly, a black sword swept across KO's back. If KO's reaction had been delayed, his body would have been split in half. Rosa didn't move. What slashed KO was the chaos blade formed at her feet following Rosa's will. Before they knew it, dozens of those swords had formed. The pillars of light were mercilessly sliced, leaving only bright traces. Before even the traces vanished, the black sword swirled and aimed at Jean, KO, and Talaris. Brother Jean, don't worry about me. Save your companion, shouted KO as he pushed back the chaos swords with his arrows. Jean didn't even have time to respond. Talaris and Mort's frost protective shield, deployed in time to block the attacks, was breaking too quickly. On the other hand, Rosa's number of swords was increasing with every blink. 100, 200, 300. Rosa's first move was the moment Jean lunged at Talaris. The family's value is dominance through strength, not immorality. That's what you often said. It used to be like that. I've often thought about it, but I don't know the difference no matter how much I think about it. Jean, blocking Frenzy's sword, stepped back. Runcandle has killed countless people so far, and has enjoyed conquests and looting. This too would be immoral to some people. What are your standards? Jean didn't hesitate to respond. I'm a human born into a sword family and the rightful heir of the magic sword, not a chaos pawn. That's all. That's a good answer. Jean stepped back and countered Frenzy. The power of Rosa, felt in a single clash, clearly surpassed his. It would have been the same even if Jean didn't have the fatigue and accumulated wounds from the previous battle. Moreover, he felt the energy piercing his body through the clash swords. Like a poison, chaos is poisoning my body. Chaos, a dark force that plunges humans into demonic nature. Rosa herself is a massive chaos and the most powerful source of infection. Ordinary warriors would be engulfed in chaos by merely standing near her. Perhaps not even 9-star or higher warriors would be able to withstand it, and even superhumans would find it impossible to engage in direct combat with her for an extended period. No, it wasn't just an idea, it was a certainty. Jean could feel the god of battle's blood and the light heart beating wildly and pushing away the chaos transmitted by Rosa. It didn't happen when I first met her in the Garden of Swords. Is it the result of receiving something more from the prophet after our conversation changed? Or was she hiding it? In any case, Rosa's contagion meant one thing. Currently, Jean was the only human who could fight Rosa in the human world. Elena's words about the Tribe of Legends being immune to chaos are true. If so, you two are beyond human. I can't help feeling that you still want to converse with me as equals. What's the reason? Do you want false comfort knowing you're not the only one who crossed the line? You'll understand when you have a child, a satisfying child, how much joy it brings to have a child like yourself. That's all there is to it. You're completely insane. I'd rather not be treated like you, who have succumbed to chaos. Well, in that case, Runcandle would have ended before you arrived. It seems you still misunderstand this aspect about me. Madness or demonic nature. Although she was said to be mad, Rosa was different from Ron before defying his fate or Smarion in the Ghost Castle, who had lost reason. If she had accepted such chaos, she should have lost her sanity long ago. But Jean couldn't perceive any of that in Rosa. Instead, Rosa seemed more than ever a living person. In Jin's memories, the acting matriarch rarely showed any emotion, especially emotions like joy and satisfaction. The current Rosa seemed genuinely joyful. She also seemed sad, knowing she would have to kill her beloved son with her own hands. Jin's gaze fell on the rear of Rosa, where he saw Talaris and Mort barely holding on amidst the chaos blades. Do you want to save the master of the hidden palace? Surely you consider her more like a mother than me. The frenzy's blade pierced Jin's chest. He managed to block it with Bradamanti, but lost balance and was sent flying backward. I'm jealous, huh? Having spoken thus, Rosa disregarded Jin's attempt to block her subsequent attack and turned her body to look at Talaris. For a moment, thoughts about Talaris flooded Rosa's mind. Looking back, it seemed she had always felt jealous of the hidden palace master. Not just now. Siren had always been closer to her than to herself. I wonder how it would be if the first sword that saved you took the life of the hidden palace master. If that were the case, would it hurt you a bit? Meteor shower. Runcandle's third final movement, the bloodline sword that saved Jean for the first time. The raised frenzy summoned black meteors. The power, surpassing even that of Luna's mental sword. Blood moon that ravaged an entire island that day, shook the entire battlefield even before hitting the ground. However, the black meteor remained suspended in the sky for a while, as if caught in a loop. Ultimate Shadow Sword Technique. First movement. First night. Sensory blocking, the first sign of the Ultimate Shadow Sword Technique. For an instant, Rosa's senses were blocked. However, before 3 seconds passed, Rosa regained her senses and began controlling the meteor shower once more. The shadow force of the first night and the chaos of the meteoric sword began to push against each other, and the struggle between Jean and Rosa began. Is this the best sword you've completed so far? The hundreds of black sword energies that seemed to overwhelm the entire battlefield stopped moving. It was the result of Rosa fully concentrating on the meteor shower. Thanks to this, Kao, Talaris, and Mort could pause for a moment to catch their breath. However, they couldn't move. The blades that had stopped moving blocked their path like bars of a prison. Kao still had the strength to pierce through them, but Talaris did not. Mort attempted a brief dimensional shift, but the fatigue and thick chaos blocking the dimensional portal to the snow garden made it impossible. It seemed like time had stopped on the battlefield. The meteor shower and the first night advanced so slowly that one had to look closely to realize it. Jin's ultimate technique was losing ground. The curtains of shadow force layers were silently being shattered by the meteor shower. Rosa lowered her head, seemingly disappointed. Very impressive sword. Her disappointment wasn't because she thought Jin's ultimate technique was ridiculous. Contrary to appearances, Rosa knew that her meteor shower was being completely blocked by the shadow energy of the first night. The disappointment was that she couldn't kill Talaris with that sword. As soon as Rosa finished speaking, the meteor shower disappeared as if absorbed by the first night. Jean was bleeding from every pore of his face, and Rosa seemed to stagger from the impact. But that was all. Rosa wouldn't delay in unleashing her next sword move to finish off Talaris. Jean didn't have much strength left, but still, he launched his body forward. If I use my last strength to unleash the sword of the reign of the King of Legends again, what will come next? He couldn't think that far ahead. The only conviction filling Jin's mind was that he couldn't let Talaris die. In that single moment, his heart was completely dominated by emotion. To Jean, Talaris was such a person. A comrade who always held significant meaning for Jean. Kao also pierced through the blades of chaos and advanced with Jean, and Talaris attempted to scream. She tried to tell them not to come, to escape and survive. She also received Rosa's sword before Jean arrived. That's why she knew Jean was Rosa's only opponent. If Jean died trying to save her here, the world would no longer be able to face Rosa. But before Talaris could say those words, Jean realized he didn't need to risk his life to save her at that moment. Above Talaris' head descended a dragon. A black light descended like salvation. Long time no see, brat. The black dragon, Murakan, Jin's guardian dragon. Fourth secret technique of Runcandle, Black Cross. Rosa released the sword as the meteor shower shattered. The blade of frenzy, marked with a black cross, emitted black energy. The energy in the form of a black cross spilled towards Talaris in a circle around the intersection point of the cross. Rosa was not a pureblood Runcandle, but she executed final movements and secret techniques perfectly even without a blessed body due to chaos acceptance. Her power was comparable to Siren's. There was no way Talaris and Mort could escape the countless black cross-shaped blades. Initially, Jean and Ko were supposed to risk their lives to pierce through Rosa and plunge into the energy. However, it wasn't certain that their exhausted bodies could withstand Rosa's secret technique. Perhaps not only would they fail to save Talaris, but they themselves would face death. If Murakan hadn't appeared now, it would most likely have ended like this. As the black cross-shaped energy attacked Talaris and Mort, Murakan's huge body suddenly appeared behind them like a black mountain. At first glance, his body was much larger than Jean remembered. His wings, spread like a wall, blocked the black cross, leaving enough space even for Mort to fit within them. The energy from Frenzy's extended sword constantly caused cracks in the wings. It seemed as if the wings were about to tear apart in an instant, but it was nothing more than an optical illusion caused by the flickering shadow energy. And you too, mistress of the hidden palace. How did you become so weak? It seems that Sir Mort is also quite injured. Talaris lifted her head. She smirked in relief at being surrounded by Murakan's protective shield. Although she had just doubted death, she now felt that the embrace of this dark, gigantic dragon was the safest place in the world. You've come at the perfect time. How did you become so strong, brother Black Dragon? I've just recovered a bit more of what I had lost. And thanks to that, I think neither the brat nor I will lose you today. I'm going to fall in love with you. Murakan possessed 50% of his former strength during the War of the Sword Emperor Castle, when he fought alongside his comrades. Not only Jean but also Talaris, who couldn't sense shadow energy with such sensitivity, could easily recognize that Murakan's current power level was near his prime. Jin's shadow energy, which had finally reached 10 stars, and the crises Murakan had overcome on behalf of Sodaret, were restoring his former strength. Murakan spread his wings again. Talaris and Mort received no damage from the Black Cross, and Rosa's expression distorted. The former guardian dragon of the family, I didn't feel any signal of your arrival. That's why Rosa was angry. She could feel all the battles that were happening in the Garden of Swords and throughout the Kalen area as if it were her own body. However, she didn't feel Murakan's presence at all. This means that Murakan didn't come from outside the Garden of Swords, but suddenly appeared from within. It seems you still lack enlightenment, Rosa Runcandle. Rosa turned around and looked at Jean. You and your comrades are really lucky, younger son. When you're in a crisis like this, someone always comes to rescue you. Rosa didn't know all the details of Jean and his companion's adventures, but she knew they had always managed to overcome difficulties with the help of others or among themselves. Nothing like that had ever happened in her Runcandle. No matter how much she hoped, there was no hope that someone would return, and Rosa didn't bother to hide the bitterness that fact caused her. This mother will break that cycle. The chaos blade that stopped in midair began to spin again. The blades pushed the group more fiercely than before, as if fueled by Rosa's anger. At the same time, parts of Murakan's body dispersed into shadow energy and trapped Talaris and Mort. He quickly moved like a hawk and instantly appeared next to Jean. Rosa scattered swords in all directions from her position. Parts of Murakan's body, transformed into smoke-like forms, were swept away, but didn't deal him a significant blow. Despite Muraken's arrival, the situation still overwhelmingly favored Rosa. Jean, Talaris, and Kao were not in a condition to fight properly. And that wasn't all. Jean could sense Muraken's urgency without having the chance to properly greet him. "Are you not in a condition to fight either?" "It's not that, but my time is running out." After the end of the War of the Sword Emperor Castle, Muraken had been acting as Soderet's substitute in place of Misha. Even Misha, who had previously been in charge of Soderet's affairs, didn't fully understand the details. As it was beyond mortal understanding, Misha's and Muraken's functions were simply to maintain their existence in the realm of Soderet. And leaving that position poses a great threat to the world. In particular, Muraken is not as skilled as Misha, so his absence could only be brief, especially when using such immense power. That's why Rosa hadn't sensed Muraken's presence. Muraken had manifested here without any physical movement, directly from the realm of the gods. There was no time to explain it in detail, so we have to escape quickly. You can't keep fighting in your current state anyway. Furthermore, Ilona Zippel's seal was also a problem. As Talaris's internal injuries worsened, Misha had to bear an extra burden to seal them. Talaris had been worried about the seal since Rosa attacked her. Jean nodded. In Muraken's opinion, Rosa's power still had some limitations. "Don't underestimate me, Muraken. Do you think you can escape?" "Don't be pretentious, Rosa Runcandle. I'm not the only one with little time. Right now, I can see things that mortals cannot." "You speak with arrogance when your only option is to flee." Swish. Rosa lunged forward and split Muraken's breath in half as he had just exhaled. Shadow energy tendrils from all directions blocked her path, but Frenzy only halted when it collided with Bradamanti. "I can feel your anger." Rosa continued her assault, but Muraken's shadow energy and Kao's arrows limited her movement. While Frenzy halted Kao's attack, the puncture of shadow energy grazed Rosa's forehead and cut her horn by half a finger, splattering black blood. Rosa's chaos, which had previously been stable enough to resemble shadow energy, began to fluctuate from the moment the black cross was intercepted by Muraken. Her chaos was chaotic. The color and power became inconsistent. As expected, Muraken was right. There are limitations to this infinite power. It doesn't seem to be due to an injury to the horn. Is the half missing? Or could there be some psychological reason? Unlike Ron and Smarian before facing their fate, she remained perfectly rational. Jean thought that might be the key. It reminded him of what Rosa herself had said. "I have not yet succumbed to chaos." In any case, the priority now was to escape. Even if her chaos became unstable, it wouldn't affect her transcendent strength. Swak dash. Rosa's sword aimed relentlessly at Talaris. Every time frenzy and shadow energy clashed, the sky cracked open. Muraken used all his strength to prevent the impact from reaching Talaris. He had to worry about Talaris's life and Ilona's seal, so his nerves were on edge every passing second. The battle was at a stalemate. That meant Jin's group was still at a disadvantage. Although Rosa had limitations, Muraken's forced return would be quicker. The escape point is in the forest about 75 kilometers away. Brother Black Dragon. Can you clear a path there? There's a teleporting flying ship. Talaris pointed her finger to where the red owl was hidden. It's going to be a bit risky. But where? If he amplifies shadow energy to clear a path, his forced return will be quicker. Muraken raised his shadow energy without hesitation. It was better to attempt an escape than to continue at a standstill, even if his energy ran out before reaching the escape point. "I'll buy you some time, Black Dragon Muraken. Escape with Brother Jean." The moment Kao said that, suddenly, a voice resonated from the sky. "Muraken, I'll cover you." It was Orgel's voice. Kinzelo's flagship, Grenel, floated in the air, charged with an immense amount of lightning energy. The other battleships were still far away. Orgel had read the situation and opened a dimensional portal to the battlefield where Muraken and the others were. Of course, due to chaos, his dimensional movement ability was affected. However, since all of Kalen's chaos was concentrated on Rosa, the restrictions were weaker than before. Murakan recognized it was Orgel without Jin's explanation. Lightning rained down on Rosa. At that moment, Murakan flew into the sky with Jin and Ko on his back. Rosa's sword energy pierced Granil's lightning and emerged behind Murakan. It was the fifth secret technique, light speed thrust. Although it left deep wounds in Murakan's tail, back, and left wing, he continued on without hesitation. "Are you okay, Murakan?" "Of course I'm okay. It just hurts. But it's a small price to pay for saving you and the Hidden Palace Master." Thanks to Granil, Murakan didn't have to amplify his power, so he had some time. But there was one element Murakan hadn't taken into account. Ram, the fact that Runkandle's huge black ship was approaching. And Rosa was no longer visible where Granil's lightning disappeared. She stood in front of Ram, watching the direction Murakan was moving. Ram and she were practically one body. Ram reloaded the main cannon incomparably faster than before. The chaos energy darkening the sky became increasingly unstable. "Rosanim, how about we stop here?" At the prophet's question, Rosa chuckled. "Don't you always want my sanity to crumble? Honestly, right now it's a bit dangerous." Rosa quietly accelerated chaos amplification, and Alina watched her with anxious eyes. Alina couldn't understand Rosa's intentions at that moment. Just a few hours ago, Rosa had been extremely cautious about the possibility of losing her sanity. Rosa had never changed her attitude since she made a contract with her. Threats, persuasion, temptation. No matter how the prophet approached her, Rosa never abandoned her principle. The principle that she wouldn't completely assimilate to the power of chaos. But the current Rosa was showing behavior completely different from her past actions. Alina hoped. No. She was sure that if she accelerated the chaos even more, Rosa's mind would collapse. No, she was certain. If she fires Ram's main cannon, she will surely lose both her sanity and her will. As Rosa said, Alina always hoped for her to break. But if it happened now, with so much consumed chaos, if Rosa's will vanished, it would take too long to recover. If at that moment the enemies regrouped and attacked the Garden of Swords again, Alina didn't trust she could endure it. Unlike the two main factions that lost their entire fleet, Jin only suffered personal injuries, and since they weren't fatal, he wouldn't take too long to recover. "Yes, that's true. I've been wanting your will to crumble for a long time. But if it crumbles now, I won't be able to bear the consequences alone. I'm serious. Wasn't this part of your plan from the beginning?" The main cannon was about to reload. "If you had made this decision before summoning the Great Knights and intervening personally, of course, I would have been glad. But now, it's not right. It's an unreasonable decision. It seems you're completely terrified." Rosa's eyes gleamed black. In the end, Alina knelt to plead with Rosa, but as expected, Rosa had no intention of stopping. "I alone can defeat the younger one. I can break that radiant child and sever the ties that protect him." Kwang! Ram's cannon spewed forth black energy once more, splitting the sky. It seemed as if a black tsunami unfolded behind Murakan. Ram's main cannon was a shock to Murakan, who had easily received Rosa's secret technique all along. This is madness. There was no way to dodge it. The cannon that destroyed the Second Fleet in one blow had a more terrible power than before. Hee. Ha ha ha. Amidst the tremendous roar of the cannon, Rosa's crazed laughter was heard. The sky and the earth, enveloped in chaos, laughed with her. "Up!" Jin shouted. Murakan had originally planned to block the cannon and descend. But, as always, he followed Jin's opinion. Jin believed that Ram's blast should be directed upwards. Although that would take them further from the escape point, Jin judged that if Ram's main cannon was directed downwards, the entire forest with the Red Owl would disappear. Then the escape would have ended. The moment Murakan was forcibly withdrawn, the rest of the group would become sitting ducks. Murakan increased his speed upwards. The protective shields and rear curtains were shattered. Before they could be completely shattered, the discharge began to spread. Jean and Ko managed to hold onto consciousness amidst the pain. A. Soon, Muraken swept through the chaos clouds as he escaped the cannon fire. The shadow energy shield was broken, but there were no fatal injuries. The shield quickly restored itself. Even Jean was impressed by Muraken's strength, but the problem was that the cannon fire hadn't ended yet. TSK. They won't be able to reload that fast, right? I don't think so. Unlike Muraken, who flew forward without looking back, Jean turned to check Ram's condition. Just now. The abyssal ship, Ram, was opening its dark maw again, and a new cannon was already reloading. Darn it, it would have been nearly impossible to escape in the first place if I hadn't been able to save my strength thanks to Orgel. Rosa's crazed laughter continued to weigh on the group. It seemed that Ram was mocking them. A chill ran down their spines. If Gleek awakened the primal fear of life, Rosa's madness was digging its own dark hole in the human mind. It wasn't chaos. It pierced through the deepest depths of those who looked like a sharp arrow. Oh! Rosa exclaimed in admiration. It was a strange sensation. Despite firing the cannon to kill, the fact that she always survived felt incredibly pleasant to her. It was the first time in her life that she felt such great happiness. The power gathered in Ram's jaws aimed again at Muraken. Although it looked like a point in the distance, Rosa vividly saw her son before her eyes. No! By then, Elena had judged that Rosa's mind had completely collapsed. So before Rosa could fire the second shot, she had to somehow restrain her. Rosa seemed like she wouldn't stop bombarding until Ram was completely destroyed. Zaz! A dagger pierced Rosa's back. It was the dagger that Elena pulled from her bosom. The blade pierced Rosa's spine and pierced her heart, and Rosa writhed for a moment before ceasing to move. Stop! You'll die too if you keep this up. Rosa didn't look at Elena. She didn't even look at the sword protruding from her chest. Instead, she fired the main cannon. Her eerie laughter still emanated from her dry lips. This time, she even gathered the minimal chaos protecting Ram. If this continues, everything will end. Elena managed to pull the dagger from Rosa's back with her regained strength legs. Then she tried to stab her again in the neck. But for some reason, she couldn't gather any strength. More precisely, although she tried with all her might, her body wouldn't move. Something invisible was holding Elena back. Boom! At the same time, Ram's massive hull tilted slightly to the right. With the protective shield of the hull gone, both fleets were now seriously pounding Ram. Some of the cannons, numbering in the thousands, reached the forefront where they were over Ram. There were holes all over the hull, and sharp fragments and debris pierced Rosa's body. Elena could dodge as many cannon blasts as she could. Elena could easily dodge those attacks, but only if her body could move. It would be as easy as breathing if she could also handle the chaos power accompanying her. But Elena couldn't do anything. All she could do was watch the bombardment fall, just as she was about to stab Rosa. What the hell is holding me back? Elena's heartbeats thudded in her chest as she looked at Rosa's back. It's impossible for Rosa to be doing this. Surely, a being that had already lost sanity and turned into a chaos monster couldn't hold her back. But what was holding her was undoubtedly Rosa's power. Surely, aren't you still in the process of assimilation? Elena asked hesitantly. Silence. As Rosa began to speak, terror filled Elena's eyes. Silence. I don't want anyone to bother me right now. Finally, Rosa released Elena. Elena, who fell to her knees and began to pant, had no choice but to obey her words. It was overwhelming. To think she had been overwhelmed by a human named Rosa Runcandle. Do you see it too, my little one? Countless enemy bombardments rush to kill this mother. But none can touch me directly. There's no need to block or evade anything. Because it is fate. Nothing trivial can interfere with the fate that now separates us. Indeed, as Rosa said, despite so many attacks hitting the vanguard, not a single shot reached her directly. They all simply missed, bouncing off with only debris flying. With all her heart, Rosa only watched her younger son, thinking only of shooting him down. A smile formed on Rosa's lips. At the same time, the second shot imbued with the power of chaos began to spread towards Murakan. The darkness of the abyss enveloped the group once again. Murakan's allotted time had come to an end, precisely at that moment. Down! This time they were descending. It made no sense to try to stop the second barrage. Murakan was going to disappear now, and the group had no power to defend themselves against Rosa. Before the barrage could reach them, Murakan's time would come to an end. Brat! I won't die! Jean held onto Talaris and Mort with all his might. Then he stuffed Bradamanti into his mouth and pointed the sword downward. Ko understood exactly what Jean was thinking. What's the aiming point? The center of the forest. So Ko also hurried to stick his feet into Murakan's back wounds. He pulled out the Godslayer arrow and aimed it at Bradamanti's sword. At that moment, Murakan's body had become semi-transparent, and Ram's barrage seemed about to touch Murakan's tail. As their gazes met, Ko released the bowstring. Snap! The Godslayer arrow struck Bradamanti's sword. Though he felt a terrible backlash from the arrow throughout his body, Jean endured it with all his might. He held onto Talaris and Mort tightly with both arms. Jean began to fall towards the forest, where the Red Owl was. Ko's last will to save his brothers was imbued in the arrow, which was firmly attached to Bradamanti's blade like a magnet. At the moment Ram's main cannon reached them, Murakan disappeared with his eyes fixed on Jean, and Ko raised his thumb to the sky. His arrow demonstrated tremendous force, instantly slamming Jean, Talaris, and Mort into the center of the forest. Ugh! Spitting blood, Jean got up immediately and checked on Talaris and Mort, both in bad shape. Talaris was nearly unconscious from internal injuries and the arrow's impact, and Mort remained still, like dead. Looking around, there was no trace of the Red Owl. Although they fell in the center of the forest, it was about 500 paces away from the Red Owl. What a way! At that moment the forest was like a maze. The next attack would surely land in the forest. Bong! Oog! In a moment of uncertainty, Mort opened the dimensional portal to the snow garden. Dark spots of chaos were visible across the pure white snowfield. If they fell more than 100 steps away, Mort wouldn't have been able to open the portal. As if it were destined, Mort only had the strength to open the portal just 500 paces away. Once they entered the portal, Jean, with Talaris in his arms, headed to the Red Owl's location using the snow garden as a shortcut. When he pressed the button in the center of the cockpit, the Red Owl vibrated with mana and began to accelerate. The acceleration needed to jump through space was about 10 seconds. Just hope the next barrage isn't ready. 1, 2, 3, 9. The space jump had begun. As Jean was enveloped in the dizzying sensation of the space jump, he looked at Ram. He felt as if he had made eye contact with Rosa. You'll soon return to this mother. I'll be waiting for you. Rosa gazed at the forest where Jean had disappeared, calming the overwhelming excitement that seemed to burst her heart. The Red Owl couldn't teleport directly to Tychon, the designated return coordinates. Originally, the Red Owl and Mort were not affected by chaos particles, but the chaos from Rosa covering Kalen was so thick that it exceeded those standards. It had crashed several times in forests, seas, and unnamed islands. The Red Owl's helmet was corroded by chaos, and every time it attempted a space jump, the power source emitted an uncomfortable noise. According to the manual, there is a high probability that we will eventually reach the designated coordinates as long as the energy core and the cabin are not completely destroyed. But the problem was Talaris. Heat like a fireball surged from her unconscious body. Her pulse was unstable, and the backflow reaction was so severe that it sometimes discharged her aura randomly. She needed treatment as soon as possible. Jean wanted to send Talaris to Shuri for healing first. However, even Shuri had to wander for a long time to find their current location. Jean had no choice but to keep trying space jumps, hoping to land near the Holy Land or reach Titan. The ship performed 5 space jumps, but all were unsuccessful. The Red Owl kept falling into the wrong terrain. However, it was clear they were getting away from Huffaster, and the chaos adhered to the helmet was shedding with each jump, and the power source was becoming more stable. It seemed they would soon reach Titan if they kept progressing like this. Just as he was about to press the button in the center of the cabin again, Jean heard a familiar voice coming out of nowhere. "Oh, Jean." It was Lingling's voice. It was very faint, but it was definitely Lingling. Lingling? Jean looked around as if possessed by a ghost at that moment. Naturally, he couldn't see Lingling anywhere. But it wasn't just Lingling's voice he could hear. "What? Why are you suddenly coming into my head?" "No, more than that. Can you hear my voice?" "I can hear you. Can you hear me too?" I feel sick." "What, Brother Jean?" "Brother Jean? Didn't you just call Brother Ko? Where's Brother Jean?" "Lingling, are you really talking to Jean right now? How am I supposed to explain this?" I suddenly saw that idiot's face in my mind and heard his voice. He was babbling while pressing some button. There's a white-haired human collapsed next to him. Button? Babbling? Collapsed human? Is Brother Jean in danger? Brothers, can't you hear my voice? Don't you hear that voice? Are you pulling a prank, Lingling? Ah, this is frustrating. I'm telling the truth. Jean is really hearing your voices. For a few seconds, there was confusion and conflicting messages between Jean, Lingling, and the legends. Jean could hear everyone's voices, but it seemed LaFerosa couldn't hear him. Brothers, Lingling isn't joking. It seems Brother Jean is hearing our voices. Oh, what's happening, Sister Goddess of Battle? As Vaughn was internally connected with Lingling, she immediately recognized the situation. It seems there's some kind of resonance between Jean and Lingling for some reason. Lingling, please relay Brother Jin's message to us. Brother Jean, what's happening outside? You summoned Brother 10th Battle King? Was there something you couldn't handle? Jean briefly explained what had happened in the Garden of Swords. The human world is turning into a hell. It would be great if we could leave immediately to help our brother. You've already helped enough, Sister Goddess of Battle. Still, seeing this sudden connection between LaFerosa and the human world, it seems the day we go out is not far away. Synchronous wavelength tracking space jump. Jean suspected this sudden connection had something to do with it. Probably because of the flying ship my companion built. It seems the flying ship accidentally picked up LaFerosa's wavelength. His speculation was correct. The reason the Red Owl picked up LaFerosa's wavelength was some kind of error. First of all, I heard your companion's condition is critical. If it's a white-haired person, it's probably Talaris Endorma, who has saved you many times, brother. Yes, her internal injuries are severe. Close your eyes, try to focus. Maybe I can help her through Lingling and you, brother. Vaughn's words were no different. She was going to try the God of Battle fusion. Jean immediately closed his eyes and focused on the resonance point with Lingling. Then, just as it happened in LaFerosa, Jean felt his light heart light up and could feel Vaughn's senses and energy gradually transmitting. It's a little weaker than when I did it in LaFerosa, but the God of Battle fusion is clearly activating. Perhaps because of the dimensional distance between the human world and LaFerosa, Vaughn's sensation wasn't fully transmitted. But that alone was enough to examine Talaris's condition. Both the meridians and blood vessels are damaged. Divine power with the attribute of cold energy is preventing the worst-case scenario. But at this rate, she'll reach her limit in 1 or 2 hours. If that happens, she may not die, but she won't be able to manifest the same level of power as before. Until they entered the God of Battle fusion, Jean could only assume the situation wasn't as serious, but now Jean could accurately perceive what Vaughn was feeling. Follow my senses and infuse energy into her body. Immediately clear away the cold energy that seems about to detach and fill the void with lightning energy. Jean followed Vaughn's words and placed his hand on Talaris's back. Through the tangled blood vessels, Jin's energy slowly pierced into her wounds. Though it was only for an instant, Jin broke out in a cold sweat. While she was unconscious, Talaris expelled clots of black blood, and Jin felt like he was walking on a tightrope over her life. But Jin believed in Vaughn. Unlike his anxious self, he felt not the slightest concern within Vaughn. Ha! Finally, the feverish heat melting her entire body subsided, and Talaris let out a warm sigh. Though Talaris had not regained consciousness, she now seemed to sleep peacefully. Well done. But, Brother Jin, this is only a temporary solution. You must begin the full treatment in at least 3 days. Very well, Sister Goddess of Battle. Jin wanted to spend more time with his siblings, but the situation did not allow it. Jin had to attempt the space jumps again. Fortunately, he overcame the obstacle of Talaris, but he would never be sure until he returned to Tychon. Even after returning, there were still problems. The power possessed by Rosa Runcandle, which he had first-hand experience of, overwhelmed all other major factions. Jin had to hurry to inform his companions of this fact and prepare for the future. Perhaps he would have to make the decision to evacuate all of Tychon. If Rosa's Runcandle began to pursue Tychon with all her might, Jin and his companions would have no way to stop her. This story applied not only to Tychon but also to all other factions. As formidable as the hidden power they possessed was, it seemed unlikely that they could overcome Rosa's Runcandle. They had already brought a fleet close to its full strength, yet they suffered defeat. Jin did not witness the battle to the end, but he couldn't imagine that Rosa had been defeated. Siblings, Lingling, I am leaving now. I will investigate this coincidence as soon as I return. As the sister said, this coincidence seems to be a great clue for our siblings to emerge. The frequency of their fusion was decreasing. Vaughn, she was withdrawing her strength before Jin could release her. Go, Brother Jin. We will await the day we can be in contact again. Humph, go quickly. Don't cause trouble elsewhere. After bidding farewell to his siblings, Jin pressed the button of the Red Owl again. February 27, 1803. Jin took 2 days to reach Tychon. He made a dozen space jumps since stabilizing Talaris's internal injuries, but he did not reconnect with La Ferosa. Talaris was evacuated to the Holy Kingdom as soon as she arrived, and Jin received information collected by his other companions. Fortunately, after that day, Runcandle had not sent troops outside. We are not sure if they are not sending or if they cannot. I think it's the latter. Runcandle needs time to regain its strength, and more importantly, using so much power must have had a terrible cost. I agree, Jin Nim. However, reports indicate that over 50% of the entire continent of the Huffister Alliance, including the Garden of Swords and the city of Kalin, has been consumed by chaos. It happened in just 2 days, between the time you escaped and now. It was not an exaggeration to say that the entire continent of Huffister was being engulfed by chaos. And all this erosion occurred in just 2 days. The internal situation was completely uncertain. It was not even possible to enter the lands where erosion had not yet occurred. Perhaps the Garden of Swords plans to consume the entire world in this way. If the whole world falls into chaos, they would have no need to track us or any other force. Zippel and Kinzalo. They continued their relentless attack after Jin's escape, but they finally decided to withdraw, having suffered significant losses. According to the report received this noon, only 3 Zippel fleets appeared over the territorial waters of the Luther Magic Federation. If that's true, it means they lost half of their 6 fleets. Has there been any confirmation regarding Kinzalo? Yes, but there have been no reports of a withdrawal from any expected route. It is assumed that they withdrew through Orgel's ability. In that case, their situation might be better than Zippel's. Unlike Jin, his companions understood the situation solely through the reports of the 7-colored peacocks after the battle. All the reports were shocking. No one had expected Rosa Runcandle to achieve victory against Jin and the other factions. Furthermore, Rosa Runcandle was no longer the acting matriarch. She had announced to the world that she was now the patriarch of Runcandle as soon as all her enemies withdrew. First and foremost, it was necessary to meet with the leaders of Zippel and Kinselo. The two main factions will contact us soon. They probably have the same thoughts as me. Please inform me immediately. I understand, Jean Nim. And what about the knights who escaped? Are there still no news? The knights who resisted Rosa to the end. Amidst his anxiety to know if the knights were alive or dead, Jet burst into the meeting room. My lord, the survival of the rescued knights has been confirmed. Quicantal Nim is bringing them back personally. Jean closed his eyes, running his hand over his chest. If they had all died, there would be very few left in the world who could call themselves Runcandle. After Rosa became engulfed in chaos, there were about 1,000 knights who rebelled against her Runcandle. They had fought great and small battles in the Garden of Swords, led by Dyphus, Mary, and Jordan. However, before a month passed, more than 60% had been subdued, and the remaining ones had to make a decision. Would they plan for the future, or would they fight to the end and perish? Their choice was the former, but they couldn't execute it. Rosa easily found the rebels' hideouts and hunted them down like moles, calling them to the Garden of Swords. The rebels battled the Chaos Knights of the family, but in the end, they faced defeat from the Summoned Flagbearers and the Black Knights of the past. At that moment, there were around 250 imprisoned knights in the dungeon. But the knights brought by Quicantal were now less than 100. In the process of escaping the Garden of Swords this time, more than half of the remaining knights lost their lives. Only 97 were left. Jordan looked at them silently for a while. He felt his heart weighed as if it were being filled with hot foam. Thank you all for your hard work. Jean finally spoke, and the knights saluted. No one shed tears. Jean also suppressed his emotions and accepted the knight's salute. Fortunately, none of the survivors are infected with chaos to a level that cannot be treated with the purifier. The chaos contaminating the knights was not too deep. However, many of them suffered severe physical injuries, so they would need the help of healers from the Holy Kingdom. First, it would be best for everyone to receive treatment. There is a device that can purify the chaos. Jean explained to the knights about the purification device. He also mentioned that the treatment period was long, the targets limited, and it would be of no use in the corrupted Garden of Swords, as the purification process required the blood of the battle god. I'm fine, 12th Flagbearer, Jordan said. Chief Elder. What are you talking about? Chief Elder, you should be the first to receive treatment more than anyone else. The Tawna siblings stopped midway through their response to Jordan. They belatedly realized the meaning behind his words. Jordan appeared unscathed in appearance, but he had suffered irreparable internal injuries. The price of survival for the 97 knights was his life. Jean had realized Jordan's condition from the moment he saw him. Why are you all putting on such foolish faces? Follow the 12th Flagbearer's words and receive treatment and purification. I must fulfill my last duty before I die. Jordan looked Jean in the eyes. 12th Flagbearer. Yes. From now on, I will pass on all the sword techniques of the family that I know. It would be prudent to head immediately to the training grounds. I don't have much time left. Jean decided to follow Jordan's words. Even if Lonnie came directly, there would be no chance of recovery, and Jordan deserved that respect. All right. The training won't be too long, so don't worry about anything else. Along the way, I'll explain anything you're curious about. You can also tell me your experiences in the Garden of Swords. On the way to the training grounds, Jordan stopped occasionally. Jean recounted his last battle, marveling at Jordan's incredible determination to fulfill his final mission. So you fought Rosa one-on-one, and yet the chaos didn't affect you at all. I gained immunity. It's not the kind of immunity you can share with others, I suppose. I envy you. Looking back, I've always felt that about you. The whole family does. Jean remained silent, waiting for Jordan to continue. The Garden of Swords has been like this for half a year. I had certain expectations since they sealed Kalen and controlled the information about me since then. Rosa Runcandle kept having seizures until then. And then she broke her promise with you and joined forces with the Prophet. It was a crucial moment. While Zippel and Kinslow built their fleets and employed all sorts of new technologies, we lagged behind. Of course, that wasn't right. It was as if they had no other choice. Jordan spoke bitterly. Even if you hadn't left, Rosa would have made the same decision. So your decision to enter closed-door training was probably the right one. If you were still in the family, the first thing Rosa would have done would have been to eliminate you. Without the patriarch, no one could have stopped her. Is there still no news of my father? Even in this rapidly changing era, the dignity of the knight named Siren Runcandle has not diminished at all. If he and the knights who departed on expedition were there, Runcandle would still be a land that other factions wouldn't dare to cross, even without the prophet or the fleets. Rosa said the patriarch was dead. Jean came to a sudden stop. Was there any evidence supporting her claim? No. I don't know if she found out through the prophet's ability or if she said it just to establish her own authority. She just said he was dead. But I also don't expect the patriarch to be alive. Almost everyone who rebelled against Rosa thought the same. Whether Siren survived or died in battle, it was difficult for it to matter much. If the family patriarch didn't return from an external mission while the family's situation deteriorated, objectively speaking, he was already incapacitated. It was as if he were dead. But some thought differently. Your uncle and your brothers did. Zed Runcandle went to the Black Sea to search for the patriarch as soon as Rosa's tyranny began. Zed hadn't returned yet, so his life or death was also uncertain. The 4th and 7th flag-bearers have been missing since the final battle. Like I said then, I can't say if they're alive or dead. But if they escaped alive, they probably also headed to the Black Sea. Those two also said the only way to resolve the situation was to find the patriarch. So, no one witnessed the deaths of elder brother Dyphus and elder sister Mary. Maybe they could be prisoners in the Garden of Swords. It's unlikely that Rosa released all the prisoners in the dungeon. That might be true, but if so, they're likely to emerge as your enemies. The reason our 1,033 knights were able to resist Rosa was partly due to their willpower, but the fact that they were not directly exposed to the chaos emitted by the prophet played a significant role. Does that mean that most of the knights remaining in the Garden of Swords didn't rebel because they were consumed by the chaos? There are probably some who did so voluntarily, but as you said, most likely did not. What sane knight would want to fight under that monster? No matter how strong that monster may be. Runcandle's knights have particularly high pride. It had already been known through several cases that it was almost impossible for humans to resist the madness of chaos. It was something achievable only by exceptional individuals like Ron. Even Ron was completely consumed by chaos until he received Jin's help. Elder brother Dyphus and elder sister Mary may appear as enemies. Just imagining that scenario made his head feel like it was about to explode. Jean continued pacing his steps with Jordan's without showing any emotion. It seems we've arrived. It's a fairly decent training ground. Did you mainly hone your sword skills here during your days as a provisional flag-bearer? That's right. Jean. Yes. Now you are our family's only hope. Never forget that. After saying that, Jordan firmly grasped Jin's hand. The only knight who could fight against Rosa Runicandle's immense chaos without limitations. The only provisional flag-bearer who could immediately cleanse the family. Jordan burst into tears. The image of the current declining Runcandle, the regret of the past when he struggled to become patriarch, the fallen comrades, and the helplessness of having to entrust everything to the 12th provisional flag-bearer. These emotions mixed to make Jordan cry. I understand, Uncle. During the next 3 days, Jordan taught Jean 6 final movements, 4 secret techniques, and 1 ultimate technique. Jean, who had already reached a high level, quickly grasped the intricacies of those sword techniques in an instant, often demonstrating perfect execution with only Jordan's verbal explanations, without needing to witness how Jordan performed them himself. Occasionally, when Jordan needed to rest due to exhaustion, Jean received various reports about the current situation in the mansion. As expected, the leaders of each faction urgently requested a meeting in Tychon. Runcandle had not yet shown significant movements. There were no troop movements, but there were reports that the speed at which Huffaster was invading the area had slowed down a bit. There were still no news of Valeria. Jean wanted to find out once and for all whether she was alive or dead, but he couldn't leave Tychon until the meeting with the main factions was over, because Jean had the responsibility to carry the shield of the family and of the world. "Now the entire inheritance is complete," said Jordan hoarsely. As they passed down the sword movements, they conversed in a friendly atmosphere, not as enemies, but as uncle and nephew. "Do you remember the day I cut off your arms?" "How could I forget, uncle? In fact, that day I saw your father, the patriarch, in you. The sight of you walking towards me, taking a step forward with both arms amputated, sometimes seemed like a nightmare to me. I was pretty scared that day too. Kook. Now you're buttering me up when I'm dying. It's true. I was very afraid my arms wouldn't fully reattach. And to be honest, I was sure your end wouldn't be pleasant, uncle. Was that your plan then? At that moment, you and I were nothing more than enemies. After that day, I thought you might be even more dangerous than Joshua, perhaps even more than Rosa. SSSSHHH. Sit. A metallic sound came from Jordan's breath. His moment of death was approaching. Do you still have that thought? Yes. You will defeat Rosa and become patriarch. But, bang. Suddenly, Jordan squeezed his last strength and grabbed Jean by the shoulder. Never think that you are already the patriarch. Even if all the remaining rebels accept you as their lord. Even if your father is alive or dead. You must claim the Garden of Swords to have the qualification. You must claim the Garden of Swords. Understood? Jean nodded with gritted teeth, and Jordan gave his last breath. And one day after his death, a Runcandle flag-bearer arrived in Tychon. A small sailboat was heading towards Tychon. Behind the boat, 50 or so ships emerged from underwater, with white foam bubbling behind them, rising to the surface. It was a sight that Jean saw once before leaving for the Soda Desert in the past. Elder sister Mary could be Cosmos, who had become her subordinate, coming to deliver bad news. Or perhaps they had already been engulfed in Rosa's chaos and came to attack Tychon. But fortunately, as Mary approached Tychon, she appeared on the deck, and Jean was able to greet her, wiping the sweat from his forehead. The youngest. Elder sister. Their voices echoed over the blue sea. Even the Knights of Runcandle, who were undergoing purification treatment, rushed outside to greet Mary. As she entered the mansion, Mary was filled with a sense of defeat, powerlessness, and sadness. Jin's heart ached as he watched her. Mary also had chaos, but it was not at a serious level. Jean realized that it was the result of Mary's resistance against the chaos. As I suspected, it was you who attacked the Garden of Swords not long ago. Zipfel and Kinslow followed your movements and took advantage of the opportunity. As Jean recounted what had happened, Mary nodded as if she had expected as much. She recognized Jin's growth at a glance. First of all, I must pay my respects to Uncle Jordan. Okay. Mary paid a moment of silence to Jordan's coffin. Although she and Jordan were not originally on good terms, they had formed a bond of camaraderie and companionship while resisting against Rosa. In particular, Mary admired him for sacrificing his life to save the remaining knights. If you look at this, you never know about people. Rosa Runcandle, who seemed unlikely to betray the clan no matter what, became a monster of chaos, while Uncle, who seemed determined to swallow the clan by any means necessary, ultimately became its protector. The body of Uncle must be enshrined in the mausoleum after we reclaim the clan. That goes without saying. By the way, how have you been all this time, elder sister? And what about elder brother Dyphus? Dyphus Oriboni is imprisoned in the basement of the Garden of Swords. On the day you attacked the Garden of Swords, Rosa Runcandle must have released everyone except for Dyphus Oriboni. Did you see it yourself? Elder brother Dyphus being imprisoned. Mary's eyes narrowed. No, I didn't see it myself, but I heard about it. Please tell me in detail. That day, even after most of the rebels had been suppressed, Dyphus Oriboni and I continued to fight. We were the only ones who had ventured so deep into the battle to the main house where Rosa was waiting. Then the siblings engaged in combat with Rosa. More precisely, it was only Dyphus who directly parried Rosa's sword. Upon receiving the sword strike, he confirmed the chaos penetrating his body and then excluded Mary from the fight. It was a decision made after determining that engaging Rosa directly with the sword would lead to certain defeat. Rosa had become almost as strong as our father, and not only that, she could infect others with chaos, leaving us no choice. We immediately planned to escape, but not long after, Oriboni lost consciousness to Rosa's sword. Mary's body was shaking when she remembered that moment. Mary could escape Rosa's clutches thanks to Dyphus's sacrifice. The reason she left Dyphus behind and escaped was solely to ensure his sacrifice wouldn't be in vain. At that moment, I felt an overwhelming urge to die there as well. But if I did, I wouldn't be able to exact Oriboni's revenge. But it wasn't over after leaving the main house. I safely escaped the Garden of Swords, but the pursuers surrounded me before I left the Caelin. The pursuers were about 100 knights in total, and among them were members of the Black Sword Association, who were stained with chaos. At that time, Mary had no strength left to deal with them. She had already suffered severe injuries during her escape from the Garden of Swords. It was Lynn Milcano. It seems that Guardian of Law Chief Lynn Milcano has replaced Uncle as the new Black Sword Association chief. And Lynn Milcano, just let me go. If she just let you go. Lynn Milcano was also resisting Rosa. I don't know if Rosa knows that, or if Lynn Milcano lied to me, but at least it's clear that she allowed me to live. I'll give you some painkillers, 7th Flagbearer. You should leave now. We'll report that you escaped. What kind of scheme is this? Don't think that you're the only ones who want to reclaim the Garden of Swords. You're also using the power of chaos even though you say that. I also made a separate contract with the Prophet like Rosa. There is only a difference in the method. We don't think Rosa's decision was right either. You made a contract? Damn. What the hell are you thinking? And what were you thinking when you attacked the Garden of Swords? Did you think you could win with just that level of firepower? You must have known about Rosa and the Prophet's power to some extent. It was just a meaningless suicide mission. Ha! What about Dyphus Oriboni and the knights now? Everyone will be imprisoned in the dungeon. 4th Flagbearer. Rosa had an eye on him from the beginning. He is likely to become one of Rosa's subordinates. Through chaos. Damn it! That filthy. Hurry up. Either go find the Patriarch or bring the 12th Flagbearer. I don't know how long I can hold out. Mary explained the conversation she had with Lynn that day. Thanks to Lynn, she was able to barely escape from Caelin and take refuge with the Cosmos Pirates. However, as time passed, her injuries and chaos only deepened, leaving her unable to do anything except focus on her recovery. And as soon as she recovered, she sought out Tychon. Jean couldn't even imagine how much she must have suffered during that time. If you hadn't been in Tychon, I would have left for the Black Sea immediately, like Uncle Zed. She no longer believed that Chiron was alive. It was just that there seemed to be no other option. But now Jean had returned, and changes were already beginning. After Jean entered the Garden of Swords, all factions joined forces to attack Runcandle. Although Kinslow and Zipfel were enemies, it was still better to form a temporary alliance than rely on Chiron, whose life or death is unknown. Jean paused to gather his thoughts and made eye contact with Mary. First of all, there's a high possibility that Lynn Milcano betrayed Rosa. I haven't seen Lynn Milcano in this fight. If that's the case, she's probably already been purged. If she really rebelled like us, Rosa probably wouldn't have been unaware. I think so too. Also, even if she hasn't been purged, the Guardian of Law Chief has already made a contract with the Prophet. She is not going to be a perfect ally on her own. She will eventually succumb to chaos. Therefore, it was best to exclude their support in the future battle against Rosa. And as for elder brother Dyphus, I can only hope that he is in a state that can be healed with the chaos purification device I possess. As long as he doesn't undergo complete transformation or total assimilation, it's reversible. Oroboni is a strong person. Mary gritted her teeth and continued her words. No matter what Rosa does, Oroboni will never be easily broken. Yes. What are you going to do now? First, I will meet with the two major factions and exchange information with them. We've decided to meet in Tychon tomorrow afternoon to discuss the forces Rosa's Runcandle possesses, and why they're not moving. And we need to determine the timing for attacking the Garden of the Swords. Zipfel and Kinsalow must have suffered considerable damage this time, so we won't be able to launch a counterattack quickly. It all depends on how much leverage the major factions can bring to the table. Also, if the Garden of Swords is unable to move for some reason, it might be better to bide our time and prepare thoroughly. When escaping the Garden of Swords, Jean accidentally connected with Laparosa through Lingling, and Qual is currently conducting research on it. If Brethren come outside before the final battle with Rosa, even if it was difficult to achieve, at least if he could perform Battle God Fusion without relying on such coincidence, it would be of great help in the final battle with Rosa. To destroy the Garden of Swords, Rosa must be killed, but anyone other than Jean who engages in combat with her will be consumed by chaos. Therefore, Jean will almost certainly have to face Rosa alone in the fight, so Battle God Fusion is essential. In addition, there's also the matter of Muraken's return. Muraken, he hasn't shown himself since the last manifestation. While Talaris was injured, Misha took full responsibility for Elona's seal, so the time period for doing work instead of Misha had to be extended. The Battle God Fusion, the return of Muraken, and the Golden Armada. As Jean told Mary about his best cards, a faint smile appeared on her lips. As expected, you've grown up. The youngest. Having you here makes me feel more secure. I'll do my best to fight with all three prepared. We need to know why the Garden of Swords isn't moving so we can prepare properly. And having you here makes me feel secure too. So, please don't cry, elder sister. Mary was leaning against Jin's chest, crying her heart out. She was releasing the guilt of leaving Dyphus behind, the pain of not being able to protect the clan, all for the first time in 6 months. To her youngest brother who had grown into a strong man. Our Runcandle is not lost yet. We just need to reclaim it, elder sister. Our home. Today will be the last time you see my weakness. You don't look weak at all. But if it gets tough, you can lean on me like this anytime. We're family, aren't we? Suddenly, they sensed someone behind them. The Tawna brothers were approaching, glancing around cautiously. When the Tawna brothers saw Mary crying, they were startled and tried to go back. But Jean silently gestured for them to come closer. Then the Tawna brothers also hugged Mary and cried, and Jean comforted them by patting their backs. March 4, 1803. It had been approximately 10 days since the conclusion of the Garden of Swords battle, also known as the Battle of the Main Factions. The whole world trembled with an unprecedented fear. Barely 3 years had passed since the official 5-year ceasefire agreement, and out of nowhere, the main factions launched a surprise attack against Huffister overnight, a shocking event in itself. The fact that the practical victor of that battle was Runcandle, and that Runcandle had come to corrupt all of Huffister by partnering with Chaos, plunged the world even further into terror. Rosa Runcandle revealed that Siren Runcandle, Patriarch of Runcandle, has died in the Black Sea. The being that killed the demigod was the king of the Black Sea, implying that there are still other beings like Glyek from the castle of the Sword Emperor War. Black Panther, as the new Patriarch of Runcandle, announced her intention to continue the legacy of the previous Patriarch and subdue the kings of the Black Sea. However, she emphasized that the unification of the entire world was the top priority. Jean Runcandle formed an alliance with Zippel and Kinsalow and committed betrayal. Rosa Runcandle stripped him of his flag-bearer status and defined him as an enemy of the clan. The world is in turmoil. Is the 1,000-year war coming to an end? Special reports came one after another. The bulletins from Huffister were particularly active. Everyone praised Rosa and branded Jean a traitor, but Jean felt relieved amidst so much black propaganda and incitement. It seems Rosa has no immediate plans to exterminate all humans in the world. The fact that she resorts to propaganda implies she's aware of public opinion. Jin's companions nodded at his words. As you've said, Rosa doesn't seem intent on making all humans enemies. What's the point of being the sole conqueror of the world if you have nothing to rule over? She may be manipulating people not with the purpose of ruling, but to effectively obtain sacrifices, Quicantal Nim. That day, perhaps the entire population of Kalen was used as a sacrifice to power that powerful black battleship and the Chaos Power. That woman is someone who thinks it doesn't matter if everyone except Runcandle dies. The ruler of a ruined world. So, is she gathering human sacrifices to prepare for the next fight against us, Zipple and Kinslow? That could be a reason, but... Jin's gaze landed on the newspaper, on the content that said, Rosa will continue Siren's legacy. The remaining kings of the Black Sea. It's probably true that Rosa said she would subdue them. They are probably the most threatening beings to Runcandle right now. The 5 kings of the Black Sea. Jin doesn't know the exact number, but he is aware that they seek revenge from the battle against Glyac, along with the expectation that Siren's obsession with the Black Sea was because of them. Could the kings of the Black Sea be allied with the Prophet? That's possible. We need to confirm if the Prophet is truly the witch, and what the relationship between the witch's first chaos and the kings of the Black Sea is. At that moment, Jin said that Jet and Gilly entered the meeting room. My lord, Zipple's and Kinslow's ships have entered our territory. At 3 in the afternoon, representatives from the 2 main factions arrived in Tychon for the meeting. Let's hope they have some useful information. Did they fulfill their promise? Yes, my lord. Both sides only brought 1 flagship each. They made no unreasonable demands, and they're disembarking at sea and sending only a few individuals ashore. 4 from Zipple and 3 from Kinslow. They seem quite nervous, coming with such a reduced number and no escort, straight to our headquarters. Just 3 years ago, a handful of key figures from the 2 main factions wouldn't have felt threatened for their safety. But now they had a lot at stake to face Tychon. Though Tychon's overall power had increased, Jin's presence was the main reason. They must be in a hurry, but we are no different. Jin and his entourage left the mansion and headed to the first floor of Tychon, where they soon came face to face with the leaders of each faction. Jin's expression soured as he looked at them, seemingly disappointed. Why have you come? I have clearly conveyed that the leaders should discuss this matter. The 4 Zipple representatives removed their togas. Octavia, Hito, Sandra, and someone Jin saw for the first time in his life. Ronald Zipple, Kellyark's eldest son. In his past life, he was known as a talented individual in Zipple's 2nd generation, after Baradin, and powerful people used to classify him as someone who didn't shine because he was overshadowed by Baradin and Luna. Does that mean he was Zipple's hidden force like Octavia? Strictly speaking, Ronald was more of an unknown force than a hidden force. Jin didn't know in his past life, but even then, the leaders of each clan regarded Ronald as a key figure. While deliberately being sarcastic, Jin briefly noticed Sandra's strange calmness. Unlike usual, Sandra looked at Jin with emotionless eyes. Has she learned to distinguish between work and personal relationships? It's certainly not the result of any Zipple experiment. Ronald slightly bowed his head. My father is gravely ill, so I've come as a substitute for the first magic tower. 12th flag-bearer of Runcandle, please understand. Although he spoke first, Ronald had no higher rank than Octavia. Jin realized he was handling an embarrassing situation instead of Octavia. Nim, our leader has come in person. Haha, it would be nice if you congratulated him. Margiela spoke as she pushed her wheelchair. Just as she said that, Orgel, Bishkal, and Margiela arrived from Kinslow. Jin didn't reply and met Orgel's eyes. You have a very lively expression, leader, as someone who owes me. Is that so? Helping you at the Garden of Swords that day was a choice made by everyone. I don't expect any special compensation. Well then, I'm relieved. But Jin Runcandle, you seem more perceptive than you appear. Did you address me as leader? Only because Zipple might not know my true identity? No way. I don't think the ones responsible for manipulating your story don't know Orgel's name. If he's that kind of being, maybe not even Zippel themselves know they manipulated Orgel's story. If that's the case, that's a relief. Even if Zippel knew, there's a possibility the information didn't reach Myron. A conversation Gene had with his companions just after learning the leader's identity. Gene had been curious since then. He wondered if Zippel was aware of the manipulation of Orgel's story and, if so, what was the motive behind manipulating his story. From Jin's point of view, it was a strange situation. Those who manipulate history and those whose history was manipulated were in the same place. Besides, weren't Kinslow and Zippel very friendly when I was a 12th flag-bearer? That was until you killed Andre Zippel and destroyed the initial orb of the demon god. But Gene, Zippel found out my name only recently. It was a bit later than when you found out. Meaning the world's number one Zippel has been dealing with an unknown person for so long. If we can offer each other what we need, there's nothing more to discuss. But are we going to digress from the topic as soon as we arrive at the meeting? The purpose of the meeting is, of course, a temporary alliance. To oppose Rosa's run candle. Well, is it really off topic? Gene smiled. Orgel, perhaps you'll gain more power when you free yourself from the manipulation of history. In that case, isn't it time for Zippel to undo your manipulation of history to face the public enemy, Rosa? Gene didn't really believe it. It was just a statement thrown out there to see what stuck. Octavia, who had been suppressing her emotions all along, narrowed her eyes at those words. 12th flag-bearer, that's speculating too much. We didn't manipulate his history. Is that so? After calling a meeting, don't you think it's very rude to enter such excessive speculation? I guess that's not what I want to hear from those who broke the ceasefire agreement as soon as I finished my training and returned to the family. I understand the pain of losing much power instead of achieving what you expected this time, Spectre Captain. You, how dare you? Octavia was already upset by Jin's unilateral notification from the beginning. From her perspective, as much as Zippel suffered a setback, the Zippels were not a clan Tychon could give orders to. Moreover, receiving such disrespect was outrageous. Even Hito, who normally despised Octavia's and Cadden's temperaments, especially when dealing with Jean, understood the reaction this time. However, regardless of understanding, he had to intervene. So, just as Hito and Ronald were about to leave, Orgel spoke first. It's a very interesting idea to use me to face Rosa when I regain my strength. But Jean, aren't you underestimating me too much? Orgel looked towards Zippel's side. His face was blurred and not easily visible, but it seemed like he was smiling. The current Zippel hasn't manipulated my history. That would be impossible. It was the past Zippel who bound me, and they don't have authority over magic to release it. So it would be better to set that aside. They don't have the authority? Yes. Even the current Zippel would probably prefer to release me. Unlike Rosa Runcandle, who is practically a king of the Black Sea, I at least am capable of holding a conversation. That was new information. Octavia gritted her teeth in embarrassment. Jean made eye contact with Ronald. Is that true? It seemed likely, but it couldn't be completely ruled out that it was a lie. Whether Zippel and Kinslow had met first and agreed that the method was not feasible, or whether Zippel had hidden that it was possible. Yes, 12th flag-bearer. I hope you don't provoke the Spectre Captain any further. After all, isn't our meeting today to discuss countermeasures as suggested by the Spectre Captain? Instead, Jean had a way to check whether what they were saying was true or not. Well, I felt like maybe I went too far. My apologies for that. You've come a long way. Let's go in to eat and continue discussing. Thank you, 12th flag-bearer. However, there's one thing I must inform you of beforehand, for the sake of full disclosure. We have gathered here hoping to speak openly and honestly. Jean slowly returned their gaze. Today's meeting will be accompanied by the AZ Mill contractor. The contractor will personally censor all conversations, and everything will be recorded. If you don't agree, there will be no meeting.